Well-arrived creatures, today is Wednesday. As prophesized yesterday, we went over the specs talent trees for Dragonflights and tried to rate them based on how they looked, and what we have left are the class talent trees. You have 31 points to spend in your class tree, so even more points than your spec tree are going to have to be put in your class tree, which can be quite important for many of these specs. So we are going to take a look at all of the class trees, starting once again in alphabetical order with Death Knight. Death Knight is one of the more smooth of the talent trees. They have a very clear divide. You have one side which is entirely for unholy based stuff, you have one other side which is for the frost based stuff, and then you have in the middle which is basically the tankiness. The more utility based stuff is going to be in the middle. The starting bracket of talents is going to have a lot of the utility you want to get back, and then later on you can spread based on essentially what type of build you want to have. Still, a lot of the utility is still going to be in the middle for the blood, as mentioned, but overall, it allows you to get quite a good amount of choice across these talents for Death Knight. There is not too much that you will feel like you are missing out. If you're playing one of the three specs, you can get most of the stuff without feeling too bad. You're not going to lose things you had before, which might be one of the worst feelings when talking about getting back all of these talents. So it does feel pretty good, the Death Knight 3 at the moment. Overall, for all three specs, overall the Death Knight 3 is looking quite nice. Talking about Druid, despite the fact that many players are being quite depressed about the state of Druid when it comes to specs, because they haven't received many changes. In fact, they haven't received a change in a month and more. Their class 3, on the other hand, looks good. It looks even better, perhaps, than the Death Knight 3 because it's even more starkly divided. You have the Balance and Resto side across this way, and then you have the Feral and Guardian side across this way. You know, with a setup like this, for example, this is basically the same for both Resto and Balance Druid. You get most of the stuff on the right side. You leave a couple of talents as an extra choice, for example, Earth and Vigor, these two talents right here, in case you're going to be needing Cyclone in Mythic Plus, in case you're going to be needing Hibernate in Mythic Plus, in case you might even want to take or drop Typhoon in Mythic Plus. But for the rest, you know, this entire side is what you are going to be going for Resto and for Balance, and then for Feral and Guardian it's just going to be this side. It is very divided between the melee side and the range side, but it is very easy to get most of the things, to get all of the things you had before without losing anything, and even gain some extra stuff. So I think in terms of overall balance, the Druid is actually in one of the better states, because while it is simple, yes, while you're not gaining too many new things, it is still at the very least very smooth. It is very clean in your two sides of the melee and the ranged camp for Druid. After this, we have Hunter. Hunter, once again, has been changed many times, even in its class 3, not just the spec trees, and it has gotten much better overall. I think now, perhaps ironically, it has gotten a little bit worse, because before it was very clear if you were a Beast Mastery Hunter, you were going down this road because it had pet related stuff, whereas if you were a Marksmanship Hunter, you were just going down this road because it had, you know, ranged weapon buffs. Now it's a little bit more mixed, so that you have more choice, which might be a bad thing because you might be leaving out multiple talents you might have wanted. But for example, a setup like this for a Marksmanship Hunter is quite clean to achieve. You can drop 3 points right here for your Nezingwari's trapping apparatus and your steel trap, 3 points to fill on some extras, like for example Scare Beast. You can go and get your new shiny Sentinel talent that has been added in Dragonflight with the extra buff. If you're a BM, it's mostly just changing a few talents to go for pet damage down this road, so you can ditch, if you're a BM, perhaps some less powerful things for BM just to get your pet damage side. But overall, it is quite easy to reach this level without missing anything. Overall, it is also quite smooth when it comes to Hunter. It is quite nice in terms of the choices and options you have. You don't have many options, but once again, I value when it comes to class 3s being able to get most of the things you want without feeling bad, without feeling left out, without feeling like you don't have enough points to get everything you want. You know, if you can reach that level as a talent tree for Dragonflight, I think you are by default at the very least into the A tier, into one of the 2 top tiers when it comes to your talents. Now, a class that doesn't really do this, on the other hand, is Mage. I'm gonna already preview this by putting Mage here, perhaps even here. I'm not too sure yet, but the problem with Mage is that while the Spec Talent trees have gotten quite better, Arcane, the new reworked Arcane is actually even better than what we looked at yesterday. For Specs, Mage was already doing quite well for Fire as well. The main issue with the general tree of Mage is that, unlike what we just said about these 3 talent trees, there is quite a lot of stuff that you are going to be missing out as a Mage depending on where you want to go down to. So much like the other talent trees, this is set up to be one side is Frost, one side is Fire, middle side is Arcane. But when you go and start putting the points down, you're going to start noticing that there is quite a few things you have to miss out on. You have to ditch if you want to take most of the stuff you want, for example, as a Fire Mage. If you want to take your fire-based stuff, there is going to be some points you miss out on. For example, Shifting Power as a Mage, Ring of Frost in Mythic Plus is going to be quite powerful as well. Down the Arcane tree, you have the last point of Time Anomaly you can't even get unless you start ditching things like the buff to your mirror image to get this one. Overall, I think the main issue, one of the things we will talk about every time we go here, is the 3 pointers in here. 3 point here, 3 point here, and 3 point here. This just feels bad. Blizzard has been getting away with 3 pointers in talents, but for Mage they missed the memo, because you have 3 point talents here, you have 3 point talents here, and also there is a few annoying dead paths like having to get to Shimmer, but then Shimmer doesn't lead anywhere, so you have to go somewhere else to get into this row. For example, spending 2 points in Temporal Velocity to increase your movement speed after you blink and after you alter time, which is okay, but 2 points just to reach these levels that where you need 3 more points to even get down these final roads is a little bit annoying as a Mage. I'm not too much of a fan, and the total combination of the many 3 pointers you have here, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 of the points. 15 of the points are all 3 point talents. I think it's too much. I think it needs to be reworked a little bit. I don't think it deserves to be here. I think it can get a little bit above the last tier, but I think it needs some changes in the talents for the class 3. After this, we have the newly revealed, the newly released tree for last week's alpha build, which is Monk. Now, overall, I would have put Monk here. But the problem is, it's only here for Windwalker and for Brewmaster. For Mistweaver, it's somewhere like in this range. So overall, perhaps I'm gonna put it here, just as a reminder for Blizzard that this is a little bit unfair for Mistweaver Monks. Why? Because this tree for Monk is overloaded in utility, in good, juicy stuff down this side. This entire pack right here. Even this one, actually. You have Paralysis, you have Detox, your Dispel, you have your Defensive, the buff to your Defensive, a Dispel, an extra Dispel, Expel Harm, you have your Interrupt, you have your Dampen Harm, you have your buff to your movement ability, Celerity or Chi Torpedo, and then you have the new extras for Touch of Death, all down this side. Meanwhile, if you are a Mistweaver Monk, let me reset the trees, all of the stuff you're going to be needing at the very least to buff your healing is going to be down this road. You know, even having to spend multiple points to get all of the healing buffs and then continue to go down this road for the healing buffs. And this is annoying because it leaves you without too many talents to start getting the good stuff down this road. So it gets kind of annoying if you're a Mistweaver because of the amount of points you have to spend for throughput that is down in this road, as opposed to the bunch of utility that is down on this side. That's why I said if it was just Brewmaster and Windwalker, it would have been here, but together with Mistweaver, I think it's much lower down. Mistweaver is, just like I said about these good specs that don't get to miss too many things they would like to take, Mistweaver is the exact opposite. So you have to spend all of these talents for throughput, which means you're gonna start ending up missing on some cooler stuff like your Touch of Death build-ups, damage increases, Chi Torpedo, Celerity, Detox even I haven't taken, which is kind of a problem for a healer. But you know, you get the point. You're missing out on too much stuff. If you're Mistweaver, you have to start taking multiple things that are going to leave you out a bunch of utility. So that's why I put overall Monk lower than the other two specs of Monk, Brewmaster and Windwalker would be. After this we have Paladin. So Paladin, I'm already putting it overall. I'm putting Paladin right over... I don't know. Let's just put it here for now. I have some issues with Paladin. Number one, the abomination of having Divine Steed as a point, plus the extra charge of Divine Steed as an extra point, plus the abomination of having 2 talent points to extend the duration of Divine Steed by 2 seconds. You know, 4 points for one of the worst mobility abilities in the game is a disaster. For Paladin, you don't want to see this. The other problems for Paladin is that you have the main cardinal sin of spending talents in a tree, which is being forced to spend talents you don't want in buffs, in powers you don't need because you need to continue down the tree. Example, case in point, the only way to go down this road, the only way to get everything up to here, which includes the interrupt, which is very good, which includes a haste buff and more importantly increases the damage of your holy spenders by 20%, you need to spend a point in Retribution Aura and Crusader Aura, and then you need to spend 2 points in Holy Power, reducing the cooldown of Hammer of Justice. These 3 are completely useless when it comes to raiding, for example. It can be a good buff in Mythic Plus, of course, to have a more often stun, but overall 3 points just to get down this road for things you don't need in raiding, for example, is bad. Doesn't feel good. It won't feel good. Other problems, you have some annoyances like having to get to Med Paragon by spending 3 points on Seal of the Crusader, which doesn't feel too good, especially because this is very good for a tank and is very good for a healer. This is not very good for a tank and is not very good for a healer. Also, there is the weirdness of this entire side for Paladin, the returning of Dusk and Dawn, and then the buff of Dusk and Dawn, and then this entire side with Judgment of Light, with Golden Path, the conduit to heal you more inside Consecration, Seal of Mercy, an extra buff to Golden Path. It just feels like an extra. It just feels like too many wasted points to go down this road. I'm just a little bit annoyed at how some of these talents have been laid out, some of the more, I guess, less powerful talents being needed to reach the actual good ones. The particular trigger, as I said, is this one to get to Med Paragon. This entire side is also way too weak and needs to be fixed if you want some more power down this side. Otherwise, all Paladins will just take most of the stuff that's in here because it's much more powerful for Paladins of all specs. So overall, I think maybe it's not as convoluted as the Mage one. I think I would put it here, even though then it looks like it's as good as the Monk one, but it's not. But let's just put it here. Let's just imagine it's in the middle for now. After Paladin we have Priest. So for Priest we go back to the divide, because of course this divide is very clearly for Shadow and for Holy. Discipline kind of isn't here. Discipline, does both things. Discipline does damage and Discipline also heals, so it's kind of mixed in between the Holy side and the Shadow side. So overall, actually, the priest general talents, despite the many complaints about the specs, is actually pretty good when it comes to your choices and options. It's very easy to go down routes you need because, well, most of this stuff is so deeply ingrained into healing, from Prayer of Mending, having a chance to leave Renew on the target, buff to your Renew healing, buff to your Prayer of Mending healing, buff to your mana regen. This is obviously very clearly for just healers. You can also continue to go down this road for more healing buffs, more Renew buffs, extra healing by faster cast speed while you're above 75% HP, and then the final Holy Ward addition, Holy Ward Life, which is like an instant burst healing ability for panic moments. So it's quite clearly very well divided between the healing side and the damage side. Of course, the one who might get the worst end of the deal is Discipline, because while Holy could start ditching buffs for damage and just focus on healing, and Shadow is certainly going to ditch all of these healing buffs and just focus on damage, Discipline is kind of stuck in the middle, because Discipline definitely would rather benefit from things like improved Mind Blast, from things like the multiple buffs to Mind Blast, continued damage increases, your Shadow Fiend, the improved Shadow Fiend, the Mind Bender, the buff to the damage of the Mind Bender, and then even Shadow Flame Prism. And I think there is still enough room, if you are a healer, to ditch some of these healing points to take some damage bits when you want to go in Mythic Plus. Of course, you're not going to be able to take as much damage as you want, but at the very least, there is a decent enough divide. Of course, your power infusion and your buff to power infusion, your double power infusion, is still easily obtainable in the middle for all specs, so it's not that big of a deal either. After Priest, we have Rogue. So, Rogue is another class with a very clear divide across the 3 different specs. Very easily split between the assassination side with poison damage and poison buffs, and then the other side for subtlety with several returning things like Subterfuge, like Night Stalker and things subtlety already had, and then the middle is Outlaw. I'm not putting it as high overall, I'm putting it a little bit lower down because I'm not too much of a fan of the last bracket, particularly these 2 3-pointers. You know, when you require 20 points to get in here, so you only have 11 left, to have 3 and 3 points here to reach Vigor, your finisher buff to energy and energy regen, and your deeper stratagem, another finisher buff. It's a lot of talent points, you know. It is a lot of talent points to have to waste on these 3-pointers, which leaves you with only 3 left. Which means, technically speaking, you're not even gonna be able to get your finishers down here. No matter what you're spending, you can't get things like Shadow Dance and then deeper stratagem and Vigor. You have to choose one of the 2. I don't think it feels as nice. I think these are a little bit too many talent points to gain overall. You still have a very clear way to set up your build. You know, as Assassination, of course, you want to get to Seal Fate, which is very good. It's a staple already for Assassination. And then this side you have Find Weakness, which is also a staple for Subtlety already. I think overall, it is nice as a 3. I do think the last bracket is a little bit lacking at the moment, and by lacking I mean it is perhaps a little bit too overloaded in powerful talents, which leaves you with too many things missing. I think it would rather be better to move some of these towards this side and make it less annoying to miss out on so many things in the last bracket for Rogue. After this we have Shaman. Shaman has the distinction of having a whole lot of utility that you can get. Perhaps this can become even more dangerous to your poor action bars by the sheer amount of new buttons you can take. If I had to criticize the Shaman 3, to not put it here, is the sheer amount of buttons that you can get as new things to put in your bars. You have Call of the Elements, which is 1 new button. You have Gust of Wind, which is the 2nd new button. You have Totemic Projection, and we are at 3. 4 buttons, 5 buttons, 6 buttons with Lasso, 7 buttons with Thunderstorm if you're not elemental, 8 buttons with Nature Swiftness, 9 buttons with Ancestral Guidance, 10 buttons with Mana Spring Totem. You know, that is a lot of buttons. And it's not that Shaman is a class with a few buttons already. It is in fact one of the classes with the most buttons available to the player. So that's perhaps the only negative I would put to Shaman when it comes to the class 3. Otherwise, it's very good. It's very nice. You have plenty of options to your utility. You can shape your 3 up with 25-ish points like this, and then just say, okay, what do we need more? You know, are we doing Mythic Plus? So are we gonna need to take the Interrupt? Are we gonna need to take the stun, the buff to the stun? Or maybe not. Maybe we're not doing Mythic Plus, so we're gonna get rid of the stun that we won't need. We're gonna get rid of the Interrupt that we won't need. Instead, we will take more damage, more defensives, and take Windrush for the raid. So it is quite good, it is quite smooth in the amount of options you have as a Shaman. It was quite a difficult task for Blizzard to leave you enough room to feel good as a Shaman, to take all of the utility you wanted without feeling bad about missing out on several of the utility you had available to you, but they did a pretty good job to the general tree of Shaman so far. Then we have the Warlock 3. So Warlock is a little bit in a weird state because it's been out for a while, but it hasn't received too many changes yet. I'm not too much of a fan of the Warlock 3. I think there are too many mix-ups between your power increases and your utility and defensives. You know, even from the start, you can get things like Thinning a Soul Shards increases the damage done of your primary pet, or increasing you and your pet's stamina by 6%, and then this one, stamina increased by 10%, which is a damage increase if you are a Demonology Warlock for your Tyrant. You have further buffs like the Grimoire of Synergy, damage done by you or your demon has a chance to grant the other one 10% increased damage. You have your Summon Jailer your Decimating Bolt and your Dimensional Rift for damage. You have your Soul Conduit talent, which has a 15% chance to refund a Soul Shard when you spend it. So it's already a bunch of damage increases, a bunch of throughput you want to take regardless of the spec you're playing as Warlock, because it's just damage, right? It's already annoying when you have so many spread damage increases all around, because you, of course, as a DPS, you want to take them all, right? That's what you want to do as a DPS. When you look at the general tree, you're like, okay, where is my damage? Let me take all of the damage first, and then let's think about the rest. And in the case of Warlock, I think there is a little bit too much of this damage being spread around. So it's not that you are losing your utility, which is still gonna be there and more or less easy to take. It's just the amount of damage increases spread all around that I don't like too much, because I know it's not going to feel good as a DPS having to miss out on some of these damage increases. So one of my only main pet peeves about Warlock not being super good is the too much damage being spread across too many of these rows, meaning you can take it all. That's not going to feel too good. The last of the classes is gonna be Warrior. I like Warrior overall. I think the Prot Warrior in the middle gives you a lot of room for both Arms and Fury to get a lot of the good stuff that you didn't have before, or you couldn't have altogether before. So now, as a Warrior, for example, you can still take Intimidating Shout, plus you can take Stormbolt as a single target stun, plus you can take Shockwave as an AoE stun, which is quite good. You can still take things like Spell Reflection. You have, of course, Rallying Cry with the buff to Rallying Cry. So a lot of the stuff is still there. You can also take now Thunderous Roar, and now you have Spear of Bastion with the buff to Spear of Bastion, the Elysian Might Covenant Legendary. Not to mention you still have Heroic Leap plus the buff, the cooldown reduction to Heroic Leap. So it is much easier for Warrior to take most of the stuff without losing out on the damage, which is what we complained about for Warlock instead. And this is because most of your damage is going to be limited down here. You have a handful of things like your auto attacks generating more rage down here, and the damage increase to your abilities down here, but overall there's going to be a major skip of damage all across here in favor of utility. And you can then only start getting your damage once you reach the very end of the tree, which is quite good because it allows you to get most of the stuff you wanted, your utility, your movement abilities, your defensives, before you get to the last rows. So I think it's quite good for Warrior. It's not reinventing the wheel, it's not being drastically new as a Warrior class talents, but they are quite smooth. They are quite nicely spread out overall. What I can take by the end of looking at all of these class trees so far is how more easy it is to feel happy about these talents compared to the spec trees, these ones right here we made yesterday, because you're not missing out on too much damage. It's much easier to feel angry and feel depressed about some of the trees when it comes to how your spec is going to do compared to the general tree, which is going to be a lot of utility, a lot of defensives, a lot of mobility. It's all nice and good, but then you have to also start looking at your damage. You have to also start looking at your rotation, your cooldowns, which is what the spec tree is going to do. So if the spec tree is awful, you don't get too much of a good time by having a good class tree. So with this recap being done for the classes as well, now we have our spec trees right here and our class trees right here, and these are the current rankings. I wanted, as I said, I would repeat myself just like yesterday, I wanted to make this tier list right now so that when we get more and more changes in the continuation of this alpha and then the beta, we can then go back. We can then go back to these trees and then compare how much things have changed in the future of the developer part of Dragonflight. So we will be able to go and compare how much of the specs have improved, or perhaps maybe even how much they have gotten worse, how much things have gotten worse, maybe with some changes all of a sudden to Shaman, or some changes to Assassination Rogue all of a sudden making them much worse than they were before. This being said and done, we can now stop and take a break for this Wednesday, this reset in EU as well. So thank you guys for watching. Of course, as usual, a round of applause to all of my Patreon supporters. They are a good help in what allows me to continue to produce content for all of you to watch and enjoy as we get deeper and deeper down the alpha, which of course, as usual, I am the CFO and main representative of the No Alpha Club for the moment. You can also support even more by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel. that would be greatly appreciated, together with the last of the social simping, which is about following me on Twitter, as well as subscribing to my Patreon right down at these two links. With all of this being said and done, I'm going to leave you to the rest of your midweek. Thank you guys again for watching. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, how did this video get even longer than the ones about specs? I don't know, man. I don't know how I do it.